Today we are talking about what are my top 10 bourbons for 2024. This year was a great year for bourbons, a ton of amazing bottles. Weren't able to make this list, but let's go and jump into it and see what made the list. Welcome back to the Bourbon Retriever, and today I'm probably making the video that I am most excited to make every year, and it is discussing my top 10 bourbons for the year. How I do it is I set up a blind of what bottles I think were the best produced products this year. This year I did about a 14 bottle blind. Previously I did a much longer list, but that just personally felt like it was overkill. So this year I shrunk it down to 14 bottles, and it was a tough decision on what bottles made the cut. But today we're going to talk about the top 10 bottles in that blind. If you're interested in finding out the other bottles, along with some honorable mentions, there'll be a link at the end of the video. Now, I'm not surprised with which bottles made my top 10 this year, but I am a little surprised on the order they're in. There's a couple bottles in here that I thought would have finished much higher based on my initial tasting, but what came in first truly did surprise me. A couple weeks ago, I made a video discussing my predictions for 2025. Now, I made that video before I did the blind tasting, and in that video, I made a prediction that a craft distillery or a non-distilling producer would be the #1 whiskey in 2025. And I have to say that prediction came a little early. Actually, a craft distillery / non-distilling producer did win my whiskey of the year in 2024. Before we get to #1, let's go through the list, and we're going to start off with number 10. And this one is a Buff Turkey bottle. This bottle specifically wasn't in the blind. It's actually an Elkwood, I think around a 130 proof, but of all the Buff Turkey bottles that I've had, they're mostly pretty similar profile. So some of you may be wondering, what is a Buff Turkey? There are a couple of different names convention that people are doing on these projects, but the basic background is roughly 15, 16 years ago, Wild Turkey was decommissioning their still, and while that was happening, they contract distilled Buffalo Trace to make whiskey for them. So Buffalo Trace used a Wild Turkey's mash bill, and from what I understand, their Wild Turkey's yeast, there's some conflicting reports. Some people said Buffalo Trace's yeast, but from my understanding, it is the Wild Turkey yeast they used, ran it through the still, produced the product, and then took it back to Wild Turkey for aging. After about 15 or so years, Wild Turkey tried the juice that was in these products and didn't think it lived up to the same profile as their Wild Turkey products. So instead of barreling it and putting it out as under a Russell's or a Wild Turkey label, they decided to source it out to non-distilling producers. I haven't seen any reports listing how many of these barrels are in the market, but roughly the rumor is that there's 500 plus barrels in the market. So if that is true, you should be able to find these eventually. I know the first couple single barrels that came out were instantly bought up. They were gone in a minute. But the latest release, this is actually CO Box 2. It might still be on the website. I have to go back and check when this video comes out, but they sat for a while on their website. So eventually I think these bottles should be easier to get, but they are rather pricey at $300. That is a lot to ask to pay for a bourbon that you're gonna open and drink. But the juice inside is really good. I think it is a nice mixture of the Wild Turkey and Buffalo Trace profile almost mingled together into a really great, well-rounded whiskey. It's definitely a whiskey I think you should try. Maybe do a barrel split with, not barrel, that'd be a lot of whiskey, but do a bottle split with you and your friends, just so you can try it and taste it, because I definitely think it's a whiskey that everyone should try at least once. Now, coming in at 9 is a bottle that is almost on the opposite spectrum when it comes to price, and it is Maker's Mark, the Heart Release that came out this year. It is roughly, I want to say it was like $60 when it came out, and I'm super excited and love it when bottles that are relatively findable and inexpensive when it comes to bottles that you typically find on the end of the year whisk make it into the top 10. So the Maker's Mark Heart Release is a finished Maker's product. They use one mash bill for all their products at Maker's Mark, but this one is finished in 10 virgin French oak staves. This is going to be a series they're doing. It says 1 of 5 in the bottle, so there's going to be 4 more of these projects coming out. But if they're anything close to this bottle, I'm going to be excited to grab them, because I'm just not a traditional Maker's Mark fan. I do not like that funk that you get on their baseline products. but a lot of their finishing products actually turn out really well. Now, I included this bottle over the Maker's Mark Cellar Age. I don't typically like including multiple bottles from the same distillery if I can help it, unless I think both the bottles are absolutely fantastic. But in this case, I thought the Heart Release was better than the Cellar Age. The Cellar Age to me, it was a little too tannic. Kind of maybe similar to what Elijah Craig 18. A lot of people say it's too much wood char into it. And maybe Makers knows what they're talking about, because they were hesitant to put out the Cellar Age because they thought their products, when they get to that age statement with their mash bill and how they age them, it does get too oaky and tannicky. I didn't think that on the 23. I thought the 23 was a good balance, but the 24 is an older age product, so maybe that's why you're getting more tannic in it. So I hope the next release of it, they kind of go back to the younger age product and they just don't let it get much older. Or maybe they just can do a better job blending the barrels to kind of get that tannic note out of it. Before I move on to the next bottle on this list, if you're enjoying this content so far, if you agree with the bottles I have in the list, or even if you disagree, hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any content going forward. So coming in at number 8 was a bottle that I thought would have finished first this year, bought maybe down to third at the minimum. But it came all the way down here at 8, and it is the George Steve Stag from 2024. If you haven't checked it out, I did a review of it, and I fell in love with that bottle. It, to me at the time, was like almost the perfect whiskey. Right amount of oak, char, sweetness, spice in the background. Like, it was just a well-rounded whiskey. However, just in the blind, it just, didn't live up to the other bottles ahead of it. But this bottle is still a bottle that I'm going to be hunting down, maybe trying to trade into or pay into it if I can find it. But it is an absolutely amazing bottle, much better than last year's, the 2023. I think it competes with the 2022, if you guys have tried that out there. In my opinion, I think it's probably better than the 2022. It is just a bottle that I loved. And for those of you who were able to get one through either our loyalty program or lucky enough to find it on our shelf, you will not be disappointed when you open and try it. So coming in at 7 is actually the opposite of the George C. Stag. This was a bottle that I didn't think would make the top 10. I will give myself a little bit of wiggle room there. This is actually a different product than I did in my review. And this one is the Coy Hill that came out this year in 2024, part of their single barrel program. This one is 131 proof whiskey. I want to say it's above 130, I know that much. Whereas the one I had previously, I think it was like 126. But the thing with the Jack Daniels is they are all single barrels. So you're gonna find some variation from barrel to barrel. That's just the inherent nature of single barrels when you release them. But everything that 126 proof single barrel was missing, this 131 proof whiskey. Now, I don't wanna hype up this bottle too much. I already know there is a difference on the secondary between the lower proof Jack Daniels single barrels and the higher proof single barrels. So I can't equate this to proof or anything like that, just because the single barrels are different. I'm sure there are barrels that are above 130 proof that just aren't good, and there are probably also barrels that are under 130 proof that are absolutely amazing. I can just talk about these two specific barrels that I tried, and I can tell you that this 130 proofer was much better than that 126 proof whiskey. Okay, now the bottle that came in 6th place. This is a bottle that if you entered me prior to the blind, I would have said I'd come in 1st place, without a doubt. I couldn't pick another bottle that would beat this, but in this blind today, it came in 6th place, and it is a Russell's 15 that came out this year. The Russell's 15 is a powerhouse whiskey. I know it had a high price tag at $250, but this is an absolutely phenomenal bottle. You get some of those dusty notes along with a good proof on it that gives you a nice long lingering finish. There is absolutely almost nothing you can complain about this whiskey. I am so glad that I got a backup of it, because this is a bottle that I'm going to want to cherish for years to come, especially with Russell's already released their TD label for next year, and it is going to be a Russell's 13. So who knows if they ever go back to the 15 label, and a bottle that I'm just going to be glad to have, because I think this one punches well above those Russell's 13s. Coming in 5 is another single barrel, but I felt I included because they released a lot of them this year, and it is the President's Choice. This one specifically is number 44, coming in at 11 years. These President's Choice barrels are hand-picked by a member of the Brown family, and they range in age anywhere from I think as low as 6 and as high as 12. But lately they've been putting out a ton of 11-year bottles. Now, I have to say, with these President's Choices, I have seen a lot of variation in bottles. I've had some that I think are just okay. They are slightly above what you'd find in a Blue Label Old Forester single barrel, whereas I have had some, including this one, which are phenomenal, spectacular whiskeys. The issue with the price tag on these are a little under $200, and they can be very hard to get. And the secondarium is just too high for what they are. And especially since they've released so many barrels in the last year. Like, I want to say they had, like, through the first 5 or 6 years of the program, they released maybe like 30 barrels. Whereas in the last like calendar year, they've released almost another 50. And with them releasing so many barrels into the marketplace, it's hard for me to imagine that every single one of them lives up to the quality of those prior releases. So while it's unlikely, but if you can find this specific barrel, barrel number 44, you will not be disappointed because it is a great whiskey. We are now moving into my top 4 whiskeys. When I was doing the blind, I was kind of going back and forth, A/B testing each bottle in the blind. But when I got to the top 4, there was a clear distinguishing characteristics between these top 4 and the next level down to number 5. I tried to make a podium of top 3, but these top 4 definitely were clear-cut favorites from the rest of the pack. And number 4 is the Abraham Bourbon special release, the American Oak series that just came out like maybe a month ago. The Abraham Bourbons are the experimental releases from the Bourbon distillery, and specifically this series is testing how much the oak impacts the bourbon. This one was aged 12 years in a new American oak barrels, which are the staves that are used for bourbon. This batch is coming in at 135 proof, and there is a ton of flavor coming along with that proof point. When I first opened this, I had a hard time picking out the flavors because there was just so much going on. It is also just a very off-profile Bourbon product. When I first got it, I thought it was going to be very similar to their A. Smith Bourbons. Those are 9 to 10 years, somewhere around like high 130s, almost hazmat. The first 2 releases were above hazmat proof. And because this is aged in New American Oak, I thought they'd be almost identical, but they are very different, but different in a good way. Whereas the A. Smith Bourbons are just a very typical standard bourbon profile. You get the caramel, sweet oak with a char level in there, very prototypical bourbon that you'd find at a 9-10 years old at that proof point. Whereas this Abraham Bourbon bourbon is a much more complex with many other flavors going on. And this bottle has improved with some air in there. The flavors gotten more bold, especially on the aroma. And I also say the flavors have married a little better. When I first opened it, there was just a lot going on. It felt like a roller coaster. But as there's more air gotten in there, the flavors have definitely married up a lot more and just a more smoother, I don't like using the word smooth. I think probably the right word is approachable. It's a much more approachable transitions there between flavors. Now moving on to the podium is a bottle that has me even more stoked for the Jack Daniel's 14 coming out this year, and it is the Jack Daniel's 12. This is batch 2 coming in at 107 proof. When I first tasted the batch 2, I thought it was a slight step down from batch 1. I love batch 1, but this coming in so high this year, I think just reaffirms how much I loved well-aged Jack Daniel's whiskey. This whiskey just almost has everything going for it. It has a great age statement on there, 12 years old. The price on it is absolutely fantastic when it comes to limited produced whiskey. This is under $100, which is just almost unheard of. When it comes to Ellie's, I think they're mostly in the $200 range. But this bottle finishing in third has me really excited for the Jack Daniel's 14. 2 extra years on it. Allegedly, it's higher proof, coming in at like 125 proof area. So just the specs on it are amazing. However, specs aren't everything. Sometimes when bourbon gets older, it gets too oaky. It is not balanced. Similar with high proof. Sometimes when it gets high proof, it's just a bunch of proof and not flavor. But with how well this finished, it's definitely a bottle that I'm gonna be hunting for and excited to get. So coming in second place is another bottle from the Bourbon distillery, and it is the Abraham Bourbon, this time finished in French oak. Bourbon did a great job this year on my blind. They came in second and fourth on my list. So as I was discussing earlier on the Abraham Bourbon, the American oak, this is the sister barrel project to that, and it is their French oak series. Now this wasn't finished in French oak, it sat in a French oak barrel from distillation for 12 years. This is coming at a much lower proof though, at 100 proof. I wish if they really were doing kind of sister blend projects, they would have come out at the same proof to be able to test the difference between what oak does to a bourbon, but I trust the master distiller there. They probably proofed both of them to the proof points because that was the best tasting experience in the blend. So the reason this bottle is so high in this list is because of the aroma. It had the best aroma, hands down, across the board with all the bottles I had in the lineup. It had this nice, dusty, rich oak note. It beat the Old Fitz 13 aroma. It beat the Jack Daniel's 12 aroma. Those are two bottles that I traditionally talk about having dusty, old oak notes. And in a blind, this one just smacked them out of the park. However, what killed this bottle was the drinking experience. It is a great drinking experience. It's just not a top 10 bottle drinking experience. Drinking is just a nice, relaxing pour. I could sit down and absolutely kill a bottle based on the drinking experience, but it's not necessarily over complex drinking experience. So if you took the aroma out of it, this is probably a bottle that would be outside the top 10. Those of you who value drinking the bourbon over the aroma experience, this is a bottle that's gonna finish much lower on your list. Just when I did the blind, I just absolutely fell in love with the aroma, and that's why it finished so high on my list. And now finally, but not last, is the bottle that came in first this year, and it is the 13th Colony 15th Anniversary Blend. This bottle has almost everything that you want in bourbon. Comes in at a nice high proof here at 139 proof, but it does not drink that at all. If you gave this to me, I would probably guess maybe in the low 120s, high 110s. It doesn't have any of that ethanol burn, but it packs just an absolute ton of flavor. Both the aroma and the palate are magnificent. Both of them independently, I think, could finish #1 in this list, and we put them together, it's just absolutely an unbeatable bottle. So I don't know what 13th Colony has in the plans going forward, but this bottle has me super excited for their other projects outside their double barrel blends that they do, because this is an absolutely fantastic pour. Some people aren't a fan of the double oaks because they're a little too tannic in that double oaking process, but this bottle has none of that at all. The age statement on this bottle is 8 years and 9 months. However, blind, I would have guessed this being closer to maybe even like a 15 or 14-year-old whiskey, because the aroma when you get this is an absolute dusty bourbon. I don't know how they got those dusty notes. I don't know what barrels they used, but I hope they have some similar barrels somewhere back in the warehouse, because I would love to do a single barrel pick with them and see if I can find any barrels that have anything close to the tasting and aroma qualities that are coming out of this blend. So those are the bottles that made my top 10 this year. If you're interested in finding out the bottles that just missed the cut outside the top 10, check out this video here. And if you're enjoying this content, hit the subscribe button there. And until next time, cheers.